Ivy made her debut in 1966 with DC Comics, she was to be introduced as a villain, but over the decades, she has become more of an anti-hero. Now, for me, Poison Ivy is my absolute favorite DC character, hands down. I know I love Batgirl. Batgirl is way, way up there, but Poison Ivy has and will always be my number one. So with the introduction of green with Smart Doll, I knew it wasn't necessarily a fantasy skin tone for me, but if I had the opportunity to make any character in the whole world, would love to do Poison Ivy. So when we were in Japan and those chaos boxes dropped, we took a chance on a chaos bundle and ended up getting this space Martian, I forget what it's called, green, and that was gonna be it. That was gonna be the plan. While it has been the plan and she has come to fruition, it has not been without its challenges. My love for Poison Ivy harkens back to the 90s as a kiddo watching Batman the Animated Series, and then eventually the Batman Forever movies where Uma Thurman was portrayed as Poison Ivy. I thought she was cool, she was hot, I loved that she was a redhead, Avi, and she just had something different about her. And I began to notice that she wasn't so much as a true villain, but she is Mother Earth. She is there to protect the environment, and that is her priority. Even if it means working against the human race, supervillains, superheroes to make her dreams fruition. I didn't read comics as a kiddo. I got more into comics and graphic novels in my 20s, and most of that was in marrying and meeting my wonderful husband, who has been a DC lover forever. And I was very much raised the same way. My dad, huge fan of DC. He read a lot of the comics growing up, so it was very important that he introduced us to all of the favorite movies and characters when we were growing up. So when we first got married, we went ham on graphic novels. So many of them. And as Ben's favorite DC characters are Superman and Batman, we had a lot of stuff to read, and Ivy was introduced in many of these issues. We also had our first gaming systems as a couple, and the Arkham Asylum games were a huge hit for us. I have watched Ben play them so many times, and the stories are really awesome, and the portrayal of Poison Ivy in them is absolutely one of my most favorites. And if you're familiar with the games, you know she makes the ultimate sacrifice, and yes, I just adore everything about her. And if you are a DC comic fan or DC movie fan, you know that there have been a lot of changes that have been happening with James Gunn, who is a phenomenal director and story writer, coming aboard to take charge and lead DC hopefully into its golden age. So that being said, we've seen like Peacemaker, which is so good. We've also had the animated Creature Commandos, which was fantastic. I totally loved every second of that. And we have Superman coming up. So very excited for all of these. So it felt like Poison Ivy fit into the current events of the DC world super well, because while she has been seen animated more than she's been seen IRL as like an actor playing her, my hope is to maybe see her in some future movies or TV shows for the DC Comics. Nerd rant. Done. You will take a look at the photos of Ivy and go, why did this project take you almost 2 months to do? It doesn't look that complicated. You're right. It absolutely does not look complicated or complex. This probably looks like something way less involved than other things that I've made in the past. But there were a lot of things that I did in this build, this literal build, that I've never done before. So we're going to kind of go through that process and why this became as troublesome as it was. As most things that come in chaos, they're not always put together. So we had a frame to build along with vinyl to be flash cut. Now I have flash cut vinyl before. It's not the best job, but it did take my time, and it takes several hours for me to flash cut when I'm doing this. And then building the body. So I put the frame aside, knowing that that was going to be difficult. Ben has built several frames, and he's very good at it, but I wanted to challenge myself because I want to know how to do it. I was inspired by Beth Ramsden, who did that beautiful tattoo for Ellie from The Last of Us, and I thought I would love to do an entire doll with like full body tattoo or tattooed on clothing, which for Poison Ivy is very fitting. Ivy has been seen with green skin tone and in just normal skin tone. And so a lot of pictures that I used for inspiration looked like she was melded with the vines. And so I started painting on a sexy little like bikini deal for her. And I put about 12 to 15 hours worth of time into this before it began to fail. The soft vinyl is very malleable and it moves, and every time, I know I'm like doing this right now, but literally it was the bust where this happened. Every time the bust would get moved even slightly, it began to crack, and I knew that that was not going to be a viable solution, so I had to wipe it all and restart, which was really disappointing. So that meant moving on to sewing, which I hadn't sewed in about a year. So My Little Doll Story had a pattern for a wrap around top and then also some underwear bottoms. And I went through the instructions. It was very simple, and I was like, wow, this is gonna be one of the easiest things that I've sewed. Yeah, it's not a complex piece, but there were just things about it because of choices I made that made it more complex. So first, I really wanted fabric that looked like leaves, and I was really bummed about not being able to tattoo the entire look. So I went into Procreate and I made myself a custom brush, something I hadn't done before. It's not very complicated to do, but I made a custom pattern, making myself a brush using an image of an ivy leaf, and then talked a little bit to my husband because we do own a print shop. Something that I'm really leaning into this year, and I'm sad that I haven't challenged myself to think more about what we can do as a print shop, but he had mentioned printing it onto like a heat transfer vinyl, and go ahead printing it onto a heat transfer vinyl and then pressing that into a cotton polyester mix or blend, which is really the kind that we deal with, so I was limited in the type of fabric that I could use. So I ordered a cotton polyester blend shirt, and then we printed the pattern, and then one of my employees worked in a t-shirt print shop for a decade, and they were very familiar with how to do this, and so they walked me through the process for training and allowed me to get video of transferring it so we could press it. Now you'll notice in the video clip, you're like, wow, those are a lot of steps. And you're right. This is definitely not something that we think is viable for the future. It worked well for this project. I'm so glad it did. But we found an alternative material that I'm going to be playing with. So hopefully that's more direct, which is literally like you print it and then you iron it. Once I was able to have it, I was able to cut everything out, and I had chosen initially a darker green fabric. Did I stain test it? No, I didn't. But the pattern clearly called for jersey knit or stretch material. I struggle with reading things and going, oh, it's okay, I'll make it work. Did I make it work eventually? Yes, but I had to make adjustments, which is what you do if you opt to use a different fabric than what's recommended. I ordered this satin ivy ribbon to add as accents. And so I went through, and at first it was fine. It wasn't that big of a deal. But once I put it all together, I realized that it didn't stretch. And two was the dark fabric I had chosen stained within seconds of it being on. So then I decided, okay, it's not that big of a deal. I had a stretch fabric, and I went ahead and cut extra to make it a little bit long, just in case we were in a situation where we needed more. Better more than not enough. I also realized in doing a vinyl heat transfer that one of the steps was to flip the bra band inside out. Doing that with a non-stretch material that now has a vinyl cover was so frustrating and hard, and it took me, I'm not even joking, 2 hours, 4 hours total, because I ended up doing 3 attempts before I got this the way I wanted it to be. The second attempt was to try to be clean, have as little stitch marks as possible, and I was wrapping the ribbon around the top instead of thinking of ways to like reverse engineer and place the leaves like in the fabric before you sew it, so that way you just flip it inside out and it's there and you don't have those yucky stitch lines and you're not spending hours stitching each little individual leaf. So then I did it a third time because I didn't like how it looked, and my goal for this project was to be able to present it and sell this as a full doll, and I didn't want something that looked really just poorly put together. So I had to think really critically, and like I say, reverse engineer. My brain has a hard time kind of working its way backwards. The satin leaves started to fray from places where I cut, which you can fix with fire, usually just a little bit of a flame to melt that. But I had chosen to do the back straps entirely, like vine situation, but it did not have enough strength, and when you tied it, it just got really knotty and frayed, and it was just a mess. So when I thought I was done and everything was perfect, I had to cut off those straps that I had worked so hard to figure out how to place them in a way that they would still be visible. So that was disappointing to cut them, and then I just put some hooks on the back. Thankfully, I had learned by the time I moved on to the underwear after being burned that, again, this required a stretchy material, and I was wanting to do the majority of the underwear in my non-stretch. So I ended up purchasing a 1/4 inch green elastic and cut just enough of it where I could pin and make sure that it fit, so it gave it just a little bit of stretch. But that was enough stretch for the underwear to work, and I didn't have any major issues when it came to the bottoms. The next big part of the challenge was actually putting together the frame. Now, we do have an evolved frame that we got 2 years ago in Chaos, so I could use that as a visual to make sure that I knew exactly where the pieces were. So I laid all the pieces out in order from top to bottom, making sure that everything was accounted for. And that part, really simple. I was like feeling good, feeling myself. I was like, I got this. I've got all the pieces identified. And then I came to putting them together. Now, I took scenic design build classes in college, and I was required by scholarship to build sets or help build sets. I struggled so hard. Like, I could run a compound miter saw just fine, but if it came to screwing something, yeah, I know. But when it came to actually like drilling or screwing something, I would strip the screws like immediately. So of course, what happens when using power tools for the first time in a decade is I become the screw stripper again. But we ended up buying a handheld tool, which I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's basically a handheld electric drill. It's smaller, it's easier to manage, and that worked 100 times better. And I just had to kind of figure out what the right amount of pressure was for me. I wanted to make sure that I could put a screw in without destroying it. So that was one. And then 2, oil. Oil your bits, everybody. Oil your bits. But you have to make sure you have enough oil, because if you don't have enough oil, you're not going to get the movement that you need and flexibility. And so you might put everything together, but you need to like move them and move them a lot. And then there were a couple of pieces where they were like or raised edges. Thank you to Christina, who I messaged about this, and she was like, yep, I went through the same thing when I was doing my build. Just had to sand it down and continue to sand and test to make sure it could move. And then we had issues with the evolved feet, which was just getting them on. They just wouldn't go on all the way. And so Ben had told me that he had to use a knife. He had to actually widen the opening to get the foot to go in. And while a knife worked well the first couple of times, a knife did not work well in this instance. And so we ended up bringing in our Dremel, which wasn't really what it's supposed to be for, but he ended up helping me Dremel for the foot because I could not get it put in. Is it a perfect build? No. Did I do 98% of it? Yes. Was Ben there to like cheer me on and coach me through some of the things when I was stressed? Yes. I hope to get more opportunities to build, and I want to make sure that I improve my building skills. The last thing that I did that I hadn't done before was making eyes. Barb with Enchantarium was so generous to let me download amazing semi-real dome eyes. We bought a 3D printer, and one of the things I really wanted to do was start making my own eyes. And so having the 3D modeled eyes, which she made, is so awesome. And really all I had to do was sand them, which took me like 5 minutes to do. So they're super. So I'd spent some time in Procreate digitally making a bunch of eyes and tried to make them as unique as possible, at least unique to me, I suppose, and in an aesthetic and style that I would like. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was I really like the eyes that have this kind of a glow or metallic look to them. And so I asked Ben if there were any materials we had at the shop, vinyl-wise, that he could think of that would have that metallic-y type of finish. And he was like, yeah, what about that silver mirror temporary vinyl that we use for a lot of events? It's like for dance floors and wrapping bars and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, because the color when it's printed on it looks super awesome. And it came out so well. Did I cut them out great? No. And had I gone back in time, the cut file to be made for Kiss Cut, which is like for stickers, you know, if you see that they have like that perforation around it so you can peel them off, that's called a Kiss Cut. And then I tried one of those, it's a leather punching tool. It couldn't punch through the vinyl, so I had to hand cut them, and I couldn't get them perfectly round, so they don't look totally fantastic, but when you have the eye in, you really can't tell. That also meant buying a resin kit, which I got off of Amazon, and it worked pretty well, but I did get resin all over the place, so I ended up adopting a new method where I bought these, like, this would be an example of it, but this is actually a wig display, but I had foam. This part would be foam. I had a dowel, and then the eyeball would set at the top with a little bit of sticky tack, and then I could go ahead and put the acrylic over the top and use a toothpick to kind of make sure that all the pieces were covered, and then put the light over the top. That helped me avoid touching it with my fingers and getting it all printy. I also realized that they're a little bit large, so I need to go down maybe a half a millimeter. They're just slightly too big, and that's all right. It works fine for Ivy, but I think moving forward, I'd like a little bit more whites to show through. My bestie, my wifey with Good Life Dolls, has a shop where she does a lot of accessories, and so I asked her to make a really cool piece of jewelry, and so she made this beautiful necklace that has a part dangling in the back with these little leaves that she attached, and then it wraps around the arm, and then it attaches via a ring on the finger, which can be attached on the pointer finger or the thumb. Lastly was photographing, and it's yucky right now here, so yeah, I'm going to insert the video of me after going out into the wild to try to take some photos. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I usually am after doing photography, but I picked winter time to do poison ivy, which was really smart. And as you can see, it's just like swampland, marshland right now, so not as much greenery as I would have liked. And there's always the fear of snakes everywhere I go. I'm always like, where are the snakes? I had some kiddos that were like, why does that girl have a naked doll? And then there's a guy walking his dog who was like totally alarmed. But you know, you smile, you wave, and if they ask questions, you tell them. You tell them straight up what's going on. And that's just all you can do. All right. Love you a lot.
잠깐 좀만 더
profile photos were not as wonderful as I wanted them to be. So I decided to go in to the shop over the weekend and do a studio shoot. I have my banana light, which changes colors and settings, which is amazing, and took photos, and they turned out 100 times better than my initial ones.
Need to take a break, gotta find our own ways, girl. At the tip of the iceberg, a love and devotion, you still rock my world. No exit to this maze, every hope that I had is long gone. These nights we've been fighting, sick of.
The eyes could not have come out better. They just glow. They glow all the time. They just have this beautiful luminous look to them. So I'm very excited to make more eyes out of that material. So that being said, she is available for purchase, and I'm going to say this just as candidly as possible. She's not perfect. She has flaws, especially with the vinyl cutting, and then the body was put together by a noob. The eyes that I made aren't perfect either. She will come with the wig, that's shown because I do have extras. So she will come with the wig, she will come with the eyes, the outfit, and the jewelry that are made. I don't have a price yet set. I have to kind of figure that out. But if it's something that you are interested in and you are okay with the fact that she was made with so much love but has imperfections, go ahead and send me a message. I would be happy to discuss. I am back in the sewing saddle, and I am not going to wait a year to sew. I'm going to keep it happening. So look forward to more creations, hopefully more full dolls. I love you all so very much. Peace out, my bean sprouts, and I will see you next time. Bye!